In 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, and in the decades that followed, Egypt fell under Macedonian-Greek Ptolemaic rule until Cleopatra's death in 30 BC. During this period, we see the capital shift to Alexandria, and we also see an influx of Greek settlers. This is an absolutely fascinating period to study, particularly with regards to religion. How did these changes impact on the local culture in Egypt? I'm Madam Archaeologist, your go-to informant on everything archaeology, and in this episode, I'll explore religion in Egypt at the time of the Ptolemies. What changed? What stayed the same? And how can archaeology shed light on the material aspect of the religious experience? Say you're Greek and you've just become pharaoh of Egypt. As a non-native, you need to legitimize yourself as pharaoh, but people from your own land are also moving in, some of which will become Egypt's new elite class. And so you need to accommodate these newcomers as well. One way to unite the newcomers and the natives under your rule is to combine their cultures, focus on the similarities, and adapt where needed. Now, the ancient Egyptian and ancient Greek religions had both similarities and differences, of course, but the similarities came in really handy when time came for uniting the Greeks and the Egyptians. Both of their religions were polytheistic, meaning their followers worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, and Egyptian gods and goddesses could be equated with one from the Greek pantheon. This was called the Interpretatio Graeca. So, for example, Thoth was equated with Hermes, Horus with Apollo, Hathor with Aphrodite, Ptah with Hephaestus, and so on. These goddesses and gods could then be worshipped together by both the native Egyptians and the Greeks, without either group having to give up their traditional deities. We also see the emergence of new syncretic deities influenced by both cultures and were worshipped by all. An important one was Serapis, whose cult was popularized by Ptolemy, founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Serapis was modeled off of the Egyptian god Osiris and associated with the Apis bull, but in artwork his appearance was very Hellenized. He was equated with different gods from the Greek pantheon, including Attis, who, just like the Egyptian god Osiris, was related to the afterlife. The cult of Serapis played an important part in unifying the ancient Egyptian and Greek cultures under the Ptolemies, and Serapis was even the patron deity of Alexandria, capital of Egypt during their rule. At Alexandria, the cult of Isis was also very popular. We've met some of the gods, but what about the temples? Temples naturally played a crucial part in the religious experience here. It's not only the place where people worshipped, but also where important festivals were celebrated and where priests performed important rituals to keep the world in harmony, balance, and order. Several temples were built under the Ptolemaic dynasty. One magnificent example that's been well studied is the Temple of Horus at Edfu, one of Egypt's best preserved temples actually, built between 237 and 57 BC. To the Egyptians, it served as a place of worship mainly for the god Horus, which the Greeks identified with Apollo. In fact, the city of Edfu was known to the Greeks as Apollonopolis Magna. Lots of the temple's architectural elements followed older trends. For example, we find inscriptions still written in the hieroglyphic script, and the temple's entrance resembles those found in New Kingdom temples, such as the Temple of Khonsu at Karnak. The Hypostyle Hall also has its roots in the ancient Egyptian tradition. At Karnak, in the precinct of Amon-Ra, we have the remains of one of the grandest of such Egyptian hypostyle halls. Although the roof has unfortunately fallen, that's what a hypostyle is. It's a roof supported by columns or pillars. Here's another example of what remains of the hypostyle hall at Luxor Temple. Both these examples predate the Ptolemaic period. But we see some differences emerge in temple design as well. The column capitals at Edfu, for example, are not uniform in design. Normally, in ancient Egypt, capitals within the same row were uniform, as you can see here at Khonsu, here at the precinct of Amon-Ra, or here at the Luxor Temple. But in the Ptolemaic period, we see this change. Column capitals are not uniform anymore. Now, this may not seem like it was important because it was just a decorative change, not a major change in the function of temples, but it's still relevant because temples were a big part of the religious experience. Different designs evoke different feelings and thoughts in the viewer. You're going to have a different experience at every temple you visit, especially in ancient Egypt, when temples could be associated with any of a wide range of gods and goddesses. We also see a new architectural element making its way into temple design, the Mammisis, or birth house. This was located in front of the temple and it played a big role in the annual reenactment of the divine birth of a god. At Edfu in particular, the divine birth of Harsomptus, the son of Horus and Hathor, was celebrated. Mammises actually appear to have been introduced during the late period, but they became popularized during the Ptolemaic period. This is interesting because it's related to the ancient Egyptian concept of divine kingship, the pharaoh as divine ruler, which the Ptolemies came to embody as well. Egyptian tradition dictated that pharaohs were not merely kings, they were living gods. When the divine birth of a god was celebrated, so was the renewal of the pharaoh's power. As Dieter Arnold writes in his book, Temples of the Last Pharaohs, in the birth house, the birth of a juvenile god was celebrated in the form of a mystery drama or nativity play that identified the young deity with the rising sun. The celebration of the divine birth therefore assumed cosmic dimensions. The concept of the infant god and the daily rebirth of the sun encouraged an equation between the young king and the eternal renewal of kingship. The birth house could therefore be understood in the wider sense of a royal cult chapel. At the material culture level, archaeologists have excavated many amulets. Amulets were used by the ancient Egyptians for protection, healing, good luck, and safe passage into the afterlife. They were essentially objects endowed with magical properties, and like temples, give us a glance at how religion was experienced in ancient Egypt. They were worn by the living and deposited with the dead, and we see many different shapes and types during the Ptolemaic period. The wedge-jet eye amulet, for example, represents the healed eye of the god Horus, which had been stolen by the god Seth and restored by the god Tot. A combination of a human and falcon eye, since Horus was associated with the falcon, this amulet had protective powers. Wedge-jet eye amulets were both worn by the living and deposited with the dead. Here we have a bow-bird amulet. These were associated with funerary practices. The bow was considered one of the components of the human soul and was represented by a bird's body with a human head. It refers to what we might call one's personality. According to the ancient Egyptians, the bow would reunite with the Ka in the afterlife to create the divine self, the Ak. The bow-bird amulet presumably helped protect the bow as it traveled in the afterlife. And here we have an amulet in the shape of Isis lactans, or Isis nursing the child Horus. Isis was a protective and nurturing mother, and so this amulet would have invoked these qualities associated with the revered goddess. All of these amulets had their roots in the pre-Ptolemaic religious traditions of Egypt, and they show how important rituals used to increase one's chances of having the best outcome possible were to the ancient Egyptians. However, I will note that even though many amulets took traditional Egyptian forms during the Ptolemaic period, we also see amulets accommodating the Greek inhabitants, for example, as seen here in an amulet of the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Overall, what we see when studying religion in the Ptolemaic period is a large degree of continuity of previous practices and adaptations made to accommodate the growing Greek population. We also see the creation of new cults, such as that of Serapis, a syncretic deity embodying both Egyptian and Greek aspects, that helped to unify the two cultures. There was absolutely no suppression of native Egyptian traditions, and many older practices persisted throughout the period, even if we see some changes being made in, say, traditional temple architecture. And archaeologically, temples and objects like amulets help give us an idea of how religion was experienced in Egypt at that time. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more cool content by your go-to informant on everything archaeology, Madam Archaeologist.